All right. Hi, everybody. Welcome. You are here for today's webinar, which is Strategic Leaders Take on 2022, Transforming Work for Today's World. We have a great panel discussion planned for you today. Really hope it to be an interactive type of conversation. There's a lot of tools in this platform that you have available that you can help, it will help you engage with all of the panelists today. There's a Q&A feature. Please submit your questions there. We will do a more formal Q&A session at the end, but submit your questions at any point and we'll make sure to get those answered. There's also a chat feature. Please engage with that. You'll be able to interact with other audience members as well through the chat feature. And lots of other widgets that are down in your toolbar. So just play around, have some fun, and hopefully there's some good content there for you. This session will be recorded and available after the fact. And you'll still be able to submit questions after the conclusion of this. The widget will still work for us. We'll see your questions and we can reach out to you with responses after the fact. With that, I will pass it off to Chris Howard, who will be running our show today.
Thanks, Caitlin. Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on what part of the world that this podcast finds you in. And welcome to our conversation. I'm really privileged to have three really talented worldly leaders with us today to talk about these topics. You know, one of the things that spurred our interest in this is the pandemic's really changed the expectation of many of the stakeholders that we have in the world that we live in, our employees, our investors, our partner relationships. You know, in technology, people and process are still at the core of certainly what we all do every day and what makes the difference to drive business value, either for ourselves or for our customers or for our other stakeholders. So we really wanted to dig in and explore some of this thing. And for me, the two things that I spend lots of time, almost disproportionate amount of my time thinking about is talent and customers. So forgive me when some of the questions I'll have will probably lean a little heavily on the talent and customer question, because that's my particular point of interest, given I live in a world where I run a professional services firm, which is all about process and talent. Technology just happens to be the world that we live in. So with that, I'd like to introduce to you my fellow panelists and get them to tell you a little about them. Bonnie, why don't you start us off?
Hello, I am Bonnie Tinder. I'm the founder and CEO of Raven Intelligence. I founded Raven about 4 years ago after spending my entire career in the HR technology space. And I work directly with customers and our broader enterprise software marketplace to really evaluate the success of projects and the partners who help lead them through the lens or the voice of the customer. So in the last couple of years, we have over 2,000 projects that we have looked at, our digital transformation, as they're commonly referred to today, to determine the success and the degree of success that those projects have had. Excited to be here today.
Thanks, Bonnie. Obviously, we'll get some really, really interesting perspectives on all of our questions and the things that we push on because of your point of view. Laura, we're happy to have you. Give us a little bit of background on who and where you come from.
Sure. Happy to be here too. Thank you, Chris. I'm Laura Kamey. I'm the Chief Customer and Partner Officer at ServiceNow. I think most people here know what ServiceNow is. It's a platform of platform companies, started in ITSM and now drives kind of automation and workflow across many different kinds of use cases, and obviously a strong partner with Crossfuze. And I started my career actually at Bain & Company as a strategy consultant, working in tech for 17 years, and then came to ServiceNow about 4.5 years ago, where I was the chief strategy officer for a few years, and then under Bill, we kind of split the go-to-market world in half when Dave Schneider retired, and Kevin Haverty, now Paul Smith, has kind of the traditional sales thing, and I kind of have everything else. So I have all of the partner ecosystem, which, as you know, bridges kind of pre-sales and post-sales, and then I have everything related to everything post-sales. So ecosystem training. I have our professional services business. I have a customer success business. I have customer listening. So my role really is to be the sort of advocate of the partner and the customer across ServiceNow, and make sure that we're sort of laser focused on keeping the customer at the center of everything that we do.
That's really great. That we're happy to have you. And again, another very interesting perspective on some of the questions that we'll dive into. Barry, welcome. Give us a little introduction.
Thank you very much. I'm not too sure if I can follow those very talented ladies, but my name is Barry O'Sullivan. I head up the advisory, strategy and value practices here within the UK and Ireland. I've been here about 15 months, and my major role is to go to our customers and listen to them, understand what they are trying to achieve, put realistic roadmaps in place for them, and then work with them on those kind of value conversations and those values extraction conversations. So making sure that they kind of maximize every dollar they invest in ServiceNow. And before joining Crossfuze, which I'm very lucky to be here, I was with ServiceNow for 4 years, working in the solutions consultant organization, mainly working in their highly complex accounts in the UK and I business.
Thanks, Barry. That's great. And I realize that hopefully I didn't do a very good job of introducing myself when we first started, but I'm Chris Howard. I'm the CEO of Crossfuze, and delighted to be your navigator for our conversation today. And I'm sure I'll jump in with a few opinions and facts here and there as well when I have the opportunity. But I suggested that I might want to focus on talent. And certainly one of the things that I think the pandemic has unleashed, which I believe is going to be a real opportunity, is that, and people have become very aware of, is that talent's looking for flexibility and in fact, I would argue they're looking for flexibility more than stability in this new and therefore driving some new employment models. And I think it's created a really interesting tapestry of both sort of generational talent that's in the workplace today. I've read somewhere where there was 6 generations today in the work environment that span obviously a very wide swath of age groups. But I'm really interested in your perspectives, all of your perspectives on this notion of flexibility, this notion of different preferences depending on where you are in your career and what kind of value exchange you want to have with an employer, whether that's in a traditional employment environment or something differently. Maybe we could start there. You know, Laura, do you want to kick us off in terms of giving us some perspective on some of these preferences and where talent's coming to all of us from?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think there's a lot of different interesting things about how employee expectations have changed overall in the pandemic. And it's really interesting because I'm not sure everybody even knows exactly how their preferences have changed yet. You know, I think people are still yet to kind of discover that for themselves and actually really want the flexibility to discover it for themselves, you know? We hired, I don't know how many of you know who Frances Frye is. She's a professor at Harvard Business School, and she comes and speaks at ServiceNow occasionally. And she shared the statistic that was like 25% of diehards really want to come back to the office. 25% of like early in career want to be in the office because they want to figure out what an office is, you know, and 50% like never want to come to the office. So we're going to be like just fully flexible. I'm sure there are like a bunch of other statistics out there where you could find, you know, different answers to this. But I really think that, you know, everybody wants this, you know, we've gone through this kind of universal experience, this insane amount of, like, if you imagined 2 years ago saying, everybody's going to go remote overnight, like the change management of that is just like insane to think about that kind of shift. And yet we all did it. And now we're in this like habit of having worked very differently and figured out that like most of our work can be done very differently. And so I think, you know, a lot of roles that we expected never could be remote are now like very effective remote. And I think it's done a really great job, I think, of challenging assumptions about how work could be done, you know, in a quite a positive way. And, you know, people do want flexibility. I think, you know, the days when people sort of tolerated a 2-hour commute, it's like that's not gonna happen anymore, right? but I do think there's this this really powerful like need for purposeful in-person moments, right? To create that culture, to create that human trust and connection, sometimes to get certain kinds of work done. And so, I really think that there's this going to need to be this purposeful push to like, how do we define hybrid, and how do we create that for ourselves so that we can, have these beautiful kind of moments in person where we build that trust, build that connection, and probably get some work done. But we also give people the flexibility for the day-to-day stuff to be able to have that, work where they want to work, where it works best for their lives. And so getting that balance right, I think everyone's kind of going to have to figure out for themselves, and really, I think, wants to be empowered to figure that out for themselves, right? And ultimately, I think if we continue to be focused on purpose, mission, values, that's that grounding factor that all of us need to be able to make sure that we're moving forward in the same direction, but also with the trust and empowerment that, that folks need. I do think, kind of as I alluded to in the beginning, that we have to think a little bit differently about early in career folks, right? That they're going to need a little bit more of that connection, a little bit more time to learn how to learn what work behaviors are like, what expectations are like, learning the basics of a career. So there's going to have to be some role distinction there, and ways we're going to have to figure out those interesting different cohorts. But I'm actually personally, I'm very encouraged. Like I'm encouraged by the shift, and I think it's just healthy for people to be able to move in this direction of something that I think will feel much more hybrid than it used to.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned about the notion of purpose and mission and values. I was reading some research work that Gallup did over the weekend, and they were talking about particularly how sort of the younger cohort that's moving into the workforce, sort of the under 30 group, I guess I would broadly describe them, how purpose is such a big driving function for them in terms of the kind of employer, or at least the kind of work relationship they want to have. So I think that's a really that could get lost in the shuffle of all of office, not office, all these other dynamics that we faced over the last several years. Thanks for that, Laura. Barry, you got anything to add to that?
Yeah, so, I've got two Gen Zs at home under the roof, and I think the purpose is a really key one. I think there's two sides to this. I think organizations that have a clear purpose, and especially ones that are more in tune, I think, with what's going on in the world, whether it's environmental and so forth. I think I see this generation as ones that are really levitating to that. And I also see this generation as unbelievably skilled. They're digital native. They understand technology. I remember Sony had an advertisement campaign at one stage which said, "This VCR is so easy, even your mom and dad could use it." But it was playing to that kind of, these kids are growing around with this technology feeling. And, when I look at my children and I look at them kind of going into the world of work, they've both spoken about what purpose-driven organizations mean to them, and what it would mean to them to be attached to a global brand that has a purpose. But also, as well, I was reading some research again the weekend and talking about organizations that are adopting, are able to attract these individuals. And I think, Alara, exactly to your point, giving this hybrid approach to young people and to people in work, giving the choice, the tools, giving them that secure space where they can do their job and they can be part of a employee community is absolutely key. It's absolutely key for people to not feel isolated in, going post-COVID.
And Barry,
go ahead.
So yeah, Barry, I would add to that, this demand for flexibility, and it's not just the Gen Z. I mean, it's really all generations looking for an environment that allows them to work flexibly, remotely, but stay connected with the rest of the team, through tools, through technology. I mean, there's more and more workplaces that are even offering 4-day work weeks, outside the US for sure. And, in some ways, employees are looking for that over more money or more benefits. It's really that flexibility and culture that's A1A at this point.
I totally agree, Bonnie.
That's you hit on an interesting point, Bonnie, and thanks for that regarding sort of how to attract and retain talent beyond sort of the salary and benefits function in terms of whether it's purpose or whether it's tools and how do you create belonging, but also sort of the 4-day work week. I guess, Laura, have you seen anything either within sort of your ServiceNow has a significant amount of hiring that it's trying to do, let alone the retention challenge that the great reshuffle has faced us all. What have you guys narrowed in on in terms of the things beyond sort of the things that we think about every day, like salary and benefits as being the key to both attracting and retaining talent?
Yeah, I mean, obviously we talked about flexibility and choice being an important part of, and I think a clear vocal purpose all being critical, but like a few other areas I guess that I'd point to, I think there was maybe a LinkedIn study that said something like 94% of employees said they would stay with their employer if they invested in their development. And I think there's something about like, am I in a place where I'm going to learn and grow and I'm going to advance my career in some way? And so look, we also know that people leave managers, not companies, right? I think we've all probably experienced that or seen that in our careers as well. So for me, it's about how do we make sure that people feel like we are invested in their growth and development, and that we're also in parallel building great managers. And in high growth companies, you have to hire some of those, but you also have to grow them, right? And so there's a lot of things I think you can do to really reinforce that and make people feel it, whether you're investing in, we do something at ServiceNow in my organization that we call the like Road to Now segment, where we literally have, monthly sessions for an hour where people can dial in. We talk about career journeys or executive presence or, things that are sort of, lessons that various folks in the organization have learned. We have formalized, leadership development programs. We really focus on the notion that career growth isn't just up where, you just get a lot of frustration and pressure if you're not like, if you're a manager and you really, want to be a senior manager and that's your only definition of success. It's like, no, actually learning and growing is about taking lateral moves, moving to different parts of the organization, having different experiences around you out as a manager. So to me, like a purposeful and vocal commitment to learning and developing, I think it's really important. The other thing I would say that I'm really passionate about, and I say this on the back of International Women's Day, but you want, when you think about the talent of the future, like, and you think about what creates great organizations, they're diverse organizations, right? Diverse teams. And you need to have an organization where people see themselves reflected and see that they can thrive, right? And so I think it's really, really important to be focused on diversity, but make sure you also have diversity in leadership, that sort of it's across levels and that you make a real commitment to that, to be able to build that diverse culture. And that matters to people, right? That's where you're going to find the kind of talent that's going to make you a better company and be able to retain them, is have like a real visible and vocal commitment there. And then I think the other one that's sort of, to me, a bedfellow of sort of what we talked about, values and purpose, is also just culture and understanding what is special about your culture and being able to reinforce that with your people and be able to reflect that in your recruiting and make that sort of a living thing. So, in order to have a healthy culture, you actually have to cultivate a healthy culture and talk about what you care about, what your values are, what those attributes are. At ServiceNow, we talk a lot about hungry and humble. And that matters, right? It matters to our partners. It matters to our customers. They feel that. They actually reflect that back to us as a distinction and what's different about us versus other software companies, and people and the people are respond to that. So it's all those things. It's a lot of soft stuff. It's a lot of but it's but I think I think you have to have a purposeful strategy and investment around it to make it real and to sort of make it work, especially in high growth, especially at scale.
Amen. Extremely well said. It's what's really encouraging. ServiceNow is a substantially bigger organization than Crossfuze. We're a small, high growth organization, but we've disproportionately invested in diversity, inclusion, and belonging. We believe that that's a differentiating opportunity for us, particularly in the category that we play in. We've had strong perspectives on how to push the button on growth and training and development, both vertically and horizontally. So like lateral moves are very powerful, and so it feels really good to hear a much bigger organization sort of making those same points and reinforcing the investments we're making. Bonnie, I'm interested to come to you on the perspective of how you see all of this translating in the lens of how customers view software, the software companies they want to work with and the partners that they want to work with, in terms of the talent dynamic that we've just spent the last 10, 15 minutes talking about.
Yeah. Well, I think it's a challenge to customers in developing, retaining, attracting talent to really provide a modern digital experience to their employees and to provide them with the right tools that sort of underpin this new world of work. The real challenge over these last 24 months or so has been, to really break from the processes in the past. And the pandemic was a great catalyst to really move digital initiatives ahead, because it was either change or get left in the dust, really. And so I think, as customers and organizations are looking at new tools and providing sort of this technology infrastructure for their employees, it's so important that what they put in place is adopted by employees. It's easy to use, it's lightweight, and can be rolled out in such a way that sort of addresses the problems that are happening right now, and meeting organizations sort of where they're at. I think the trends that we are seeing in the way that customers are looking to buy new technologies is to really find solutions that are not, going to be like one technology that's going to meet all of their needs, but sort of these lightweight solutions that can come in, create a real special, solution for a problem at hand, and then scale that from there. This idea of systems that can be easily integrated across the business is really important. But what we're seeing right now is a demand for, again, modern technology to help solve problems quickly. Not, I have 24 months to solve this, like help me get this thing up and running and solving the issues that we have in the next month. So sort of like meeting my needs today, but being able to scale into the future, I think is a real theme that we're seeing out there right now.
And I think, Bonnie, I would say that COVID has really shone a light onto that. The organizations that have been able to flex and move quickly during that pandemic has really shone a light on the ones that are higher up that digital maturity, the ones that can enable their staff to work remotely quickly. Yes, there's a whole raft of other issues it brings with management and stuff like this, but the ones that could shift, enable their staff and have minimal disruption to their client base were the ones that were further on that journey. And they're doubling down on their investment into those spaces to making sure that their staff have the tools, they have the platforms to do their roles and execute them properly. But I think that was definitely one of the key lessons, and it's probably in nearly every bit of analysis that comes out on organizational impacts.
Yeah, a lot of that plays well obviously to the ServiceNow story, but I guess, Barry, I wouldn't mind some follow up on how you think sort of just the broad issues around data, artificial intelligence, machine learning, and some of those, that evolving set of technologies, and how that's overlaying and playing into the theme that you just talked about.
I mean, yeah, huge topics. I think it's hard not to pick up a magazine or see an article that doesn't touch on them. And actually, in our my kind of 101 pitch to customers, we bring these out very clearly. I mean, these are truly transformational. If you take data, the growth in data, we often talk around exponential growth, exponential technologies, but sometimes it's hard to quantify that. And again, a bit of analysis recently, I think it was by Gartner, 98% of the world's data was created in the last 2 years. So, and we know either, wearable technology and whatever else, the growth in data is phenomenal. But it probably really brings a kind of key fundamental question to organizations. And that is, how do you harness that? How do you harness that value? How are you able to extract the value? Because, historically, what we've seen is organizations have been application-led, and the data has been sitting in the application, and that's been sitting in siloed. So, organizations haven't been short of data, but what they have been has been short of shared data, quality data, and being able to, extract anything meaningful from that. And the kind of 101 pitches, and it's very like the platform of platforms pitch that I speak to customers. And when you want to boil down digital transformation, at its simplest, there's three things to think about. You've got the experience layer, and making sure that every experience that you have when you're interacting is as best it possibly can, because that obviously helps adoption. You've got the workflow layer, and that can be in a platform across multiple platforms. And then you got the data layer. And we're seeing organizations moving to data meshing and ecosystems and so forth. And this is where kind of machine learning and AI comes into it. And again, these are huge, topics. So how are you going to extract that data? How is an organization going to, be able to extract that data out? And this is where you go into this machine learning, and you're able to extract these kind of understanding business models and so forth. So I think what we've seen historically when organizations have put in machine learning and AI is the algorithms and what they've looked at is kind of looking at that as kind of really structured processes, Chris. They, organizations have, evolved and had really structured processes. So to, drive efficiencies, to drive quality, making sure things are done properly, they've really kind of looked at those kind of use cases and said, okay, what are these, high volume activities that we can transform, that we can use machine learning and so forth. Well, what we're seeing now is very much a hybrid approach. So as organizations deploying this at scale, and as organizations are extracting that value, what they're looking for is these more kind of dynamic processes where do we put human interaction? Where does human interaction need to be involved in that process? But AI, machine learning, it's changing everything that we do, even on a day-to-day basis. Alexa or wherever you're interacting at home, you take it for day-to-day. But from a business perspective, what products and services are needed for the future? How can we get that understanding of that? Well, the data will do that, and we're seeing a whole new raft of roles coming into the world, in data science and so forth, to make sure that organizations are able to extract that insight, understanding, and the value. And we're seeing whole support models, and customers and end users are expecting now to interact with a virtual agent, a bot, and they're expecting to interact with machine learning. But I think the challenge for organizations is making sure that these new adaptable processes, you're getting the value out of it. Where do you put the resource into this? Where's the point where you have human interaction, where you have a human either escalated to or interference? And if you go across any industry, you take our customers, there's literally endless use cases for organizations to get the benefit of AI and machine learning. But again, it has to be done in the right way. It has to be in a true strategic way. There has to be method in it. You have to get the right resources, and you have to have the right capability. ServiceNow has always had the data layer at the center of the conversation. It's always been a core platform conversation. And as you go from a CMDB to a common services data model, taken organizations from applications to much more business aware. So, that evolution has happened, and that's going to just constantly keep evolving, Chris. And I don't see that slowing down. I don't see the need for having that skill set in organizations anything other than expanding.
Yeah, without a doubt. Laura, I'm just picking up on that note. You listen to Barry's conversation, and there's lots of acronyms there, but there's from a customer perspective. I look at it from, even though I live in the technology world, I don't consider myself a technologist. And when you think about the investments you have to make as a business, there's a lot of noise to cut through to try and figure out what the right technologies are, how are they going to support scale and growth and the new business models that are there at potential. You get to talk to some of the biggest custom companies in the world that are struggling, that are challenged with this environment. And as the chief customer officer at ServiceNow, I'm sure you have some really interesting perspectives on how they're challenged by this question and how they're working through all of this. Can you give us some insights?
Yeah, I mean, look, I guess the thing that I would say is what I've learned, and certainly what we're teaching our field and reinforcing every day, and not just our field, frankly, it's our whole company, is that ultimately this comes down to understanding what the customer's needs are, right? It's just, you have to start with listening, and you have to start putting yourself in this place of empathy to really understand. And often that includes thinking about, the vertical or industry perspective that they're coming from, right? Understanding what the trends are in that industry, what are the trends in the company, what are the key challenges. And so it could be an employee experience challenge. It could be a customer experience challenge. It could be a productivity challenge, and they've got a big cost savings, target on their head. It could be a, reinventing their business model challenge. It may be all of those things, frankly, right? And so for me, technology is a means to an end, an absolutely critical means to an end to solve a business challenge that's ultimately defined in the business value, in the words of the customer, right? And so starting with that process in mind, and ultimately linking on what is the business problem that you're solving, what is the business value you get to, and then how can we architect technology to be fully linked to that business value, and get all on the same page about that, right? ServiceNow, the partner, the customer, everybody aligned on, talking about that. That's how we truly deliver from the promise to the result. And so, as everybody knows, there's tons of technologies to deliver this stuff. It's about picking the one that, picking the technology that delivers best on the business value. And oftentimes it's multiple technologies integrated well together, and ultimately, delivering to that value. So that's a very broad question, or answer to what I think is a pretty broad question, right? But I think if we stick to the kind of first principles approach, that to me is how we get there.
Yeah, I think really well said. Similarly, we talk to our consulting staff a lot about their ability to translate what the power of the technology is into what is the outcome that the customer really needs and desires, and helping to speak to that from the customer's point of listening. If we can make that magic happen, we can get to a place of really driving value. Which leads me to thinking, Bonnie, about the customer buying perspective. Do you see evidence that customers are looking at the buying process through the lens of value creation versus technology and price or some other set of dynamics? I'd be interested in your perspective on that.
Yeah, well, I would say the customers who have successful projects are looking at the value first. Where we see projects that are not as successful, it's where they sort of put the cart before the horse and look to have a technology solve a problem instead of really defining that problem up front, as Laura was mentioning before. So parsing out, so what sort of problem is this? Is it a customer issue? Is this an employee issue? Is this a fundamental that we're trying to solve for productivity and things like that? and then understand, okay, how do we now sprinkle the technology to solve that problem, as opposed to here's this really neat technology that's really hot and has AI and all the buzzwords, and let's try and make that work within our organization. So I would say that those are the projects that we see that are not as successful in the end, is when that problem is not defined well up front. And certainly, I think there's some key areas of measurement at the back end of the project that we look at to say, hey, was this project a success or not, or the degree it was a success? But the real key, I think, is for an organization to define very clearly what it is that they're looking to solve for first, and then figure out, okay, now what technology, what partners do I need to solve that? So it's the smart organizations that are doing that that really have the best results.
That's good to hear. So I know because of our own experience that we run into lots of clients and customers that don't execute along those lines. They execute from the perspective of buying technology. I guess I'd be interested in all of yours perspective. Let me start with maybe Lara about what do you when you see clients that are enamored by technology versus trying to get to business value, and the risk that represents to both ServiceNow and the partner. What do you expect from your field, and what do you expect from your partners when you see customers like that, and how to change their perspective?
Well, this is it's to me, this is a real it's a foundational thing that we're trying to solve at ServiceNow, and I can talk about what we're doing with ServiceNow Impact now or later. You tell me, Chris, when you want me to hit on it. But to me, we have redefined. Maybe I'll just talk about it now, because we've redefined.
I was going to ask you specifically, but go ahead.
Yeah, we've redefined our customer success offering to be real, a customer value acceleration solution, right? And the notion of this thing that we've called ServiceNow Impact, which we are selling as a product, it's subscription, net new ACV, it retires quota, all of that stuff, is that there's not one. It has to be oriented around an agreed upon definition of outcomes and value that you want to define, right? And as a forcing function, and I now have our Inspire Value organization, which does a lot of the pre-sales kind of Inspire work and the business value assessments. It's now part of my organization as well, because I believe these things are inextricably linked. This kind of promise of delivering value, and then ultimately how do we get to that end state, really all needs to be connected, and we must have this as part of our customer conversations, and the partner has to be part of this conversation, which is why with Impact our partners are able to see all of this. So we are all looking at it, and we view it almost as I call it almost like a single pane of accountability around this value, right? And to me, that's the foundation to get to these successful outcomes. And so we built a product that I'm super proud of and excited about, because I think it's really innovative, and I think it's transformational in the industry. Because my observation coming into this role a year and a half ago was that, a little bit like kindergarten soccer, we've done a whole lot of stuff to get our customers to value or to success in different silos. The BUs were creating tools, tune up your CMDB, like all sorts of stuff in each of their kind of BU things. We had a customer success architect, we had, platform architects, we were selling premier support over here, we had training over here, and we had tons of collateral coming from everywhere, and it was like, and if you looked at any of those individual things, they would correlate with goodness, right? If a customer used X, if a customer bought Y, if a customer did Z, they had a higher NPS, they had higher expansion rates, they had higher renewal rates. All of those things were true, and it was insufficient to be looking at it the way we were looking at it as a company. Mm-hmm. As how confusing for our sellers, and how confusing for our customers, and how confusing for our partners to do it that way. And so we created this product that is built on the ServiceNow platform that is aligned to personas. So the platform owner is the sort of primary persona, but we have a a CIO experience. So that's a very cool mobile experience, right? That is aligned to the journey that the customer's on, that's oriented around value. And so it's like, what are the initiatives that drive business value? How do we track that over time? And then you've got this sort of squad of humans, right? You're the humans that are assigned, and of course there's different entitlements depending on what level you buy of the product, that are helping along the way, that you have access to as a customer. And then there's a lot of predictive recommendations that will get smarter and better over time as we leverage the AI ML capabilities in the platform. But ultimately, it's all designed to get customers to value faster, and to provide those, great critical skill sets that we know are short in the industry, or that expertise. And we believe that, doing this with partners allows partners this visibility of where we are to know, oh, wow, the next piece of value to unlock is if they haven't gotten live on virtual agent. So we're going to go sell a project in here and help implement the first 5 conversations, or whatever it is. So there's this kind of beautiful alignment around, everybody speaking the same language about what they want. And it also, I think, elevates the conversation to make sure it's not just a sort of technology buyer, but it's actually the CIO or the level above that's aligned on holding the sort of accountability around, like, what did we say when I approved this PO? What did we say we were going to get, and are we getting it? And to me, having the discipline across all of us to do that more consistently across much more of our customer base will lead to all of the goodness in a multiplicative way that we were seeing with all these little individual things in silos, right? Expansion, renewal, NPS, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm super, super excited about it. And I think it really will be transformative. And by the way, we've been selling it now for a quarter. We piloted it in a very limited way last year when we were building it. We already have 55 customers on it. It is the fastest growing product in ServiceNow history. And it's working. Sorry, my dog is excited.
That's quite all right. It's happened to all of us at one point in time or another. We share the enthusiasm, Laura, for impact. We think obviously more insight leads to better conversations, leads to better decision making, and value is at the heart of all of this in the context of we all want to make investments that drive value for our businesses, and our customers are just like that too. So if we can find ways to show them, point them towards value, we're just going to do more business together, which is a wonderful thing. Barry, I know you have some real interesting perspectives on impact and how, from a partner perspective, Crossfuze as an example is throwing ourselves all into making sure we understand this so we can take advantage of it so we can maximize the opportunity for the customers that we serve. Want to talk about that?
Yeah, 100%. I think we need to go back a couple of conversations and, to really understand this, in the buying cycle for organizations now, because organizations are going away from functions and features to business outcomes, they buy technology, and we've had this conversation, Laura said this, they buy technology to get business outcomes. We need to understand the alignment between their strategy, the business outcomes, and what phasing the technology would need to be. So for me, I already said in my introduction, if you remember, that part of my role is to look at value. And, in my introduction, I said we sit there and we listen to organizations and understand what they're trying to do and the kind of timelines and so forth, the constraints they're working against. So for me, having that value conversation early and understanding this puts you in a different area, puts you into this. And I like that expression of a kind of single pane of accountability. I've seen a massive shift where organizations they're moving to platforms, going away from just, having just isolated technologies. They're moving into maybe 4 or 5 platforms that are running their business. And what's happening is then the IT and the business strategy are completely interwoven. So what that means is that when they're looking for partners, they're looking for the technology partner, but they're also looking for the implementation partner, for that partner to be a journey partner, not just an implementation partner, but somebody who's going to take them on that wider journey over the next 18 months and so forth. And for them to be working with them, giving very prescriptive guidance on, how best, you're the experts, guys, how best should we use this technology? And how best do this? And it's all part of the value conversation, Chris, because we need to reduce the time to value. We need to understand what the outcomes are, what the capability is that's going to bring those outcomes, and how best to deploy the technology, and making sure that they've got the support, you know, the training, the enablement, and so forth, and the consultancy guidance to extract value. But I mean, we've seen so many projects. We've probably been involved in lots of them where you have a business case at the start, and then it gets shelved in a SharePoint somewhere. Somebody goes, "Hey, where's that? Why did we sign that PO? What was that for?" So part of my role always is to, you know, we talk around envision value, understanding it, then creating it when we deploy the technology, making sure we're following best practice. And, you know, Crossfuze, one thing that I'm really proud of Crossfuze is we've invested very heavily in the highest skills of the ServiceNow accreditation, the Certified Master Architect. So that's really important to our customers, that we can bring the best, the most prescriptive guidance. And we've, you know, done 2,500 implementations. So we come with that prescriptive guidance. But the key bit is that understanding that, you know, validation and understanding that value extraction, you know, making sure that we're measuring regularly. I think they talk about carpenters measure 3 times, cut once. You need to constantly measure this, having dashboards, making sure that we're understanding, you know, that organizations are able to achieve those business outcomes and they're on track for this. And then, of course, one of the key things that we want to do is, you know, sit back and listen to our customers at one of the ServiceNow events or Crossfuze events, talking around, you know, the projects, talking around the success that they've had. And that's why we're here. You know, we're privileged to work with amazing technology and amazing customers, and there's nothing better than having them on stage, Chris.
Well said. I guess, Bonnie, I wanted to come back and tie this back to you made the comment. You started us off talking about, you know, the best buyers buy from that point of view. I guess I'm interested in when you look at the buyer community that you talk to, what's the percentage of customers that are thinking along the lines that Barry and Lara just articulated in terms of seeking that value proposition as a primary objective?
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, we would hope it'd be 100%. I mean, because it seems so obvious to have those things mapped out. I don't think that that's the reality in all cases. And, you know, this project impact really does create a good methodology to ensure that you know, those sort of milestones and that thought process is mapped out before the actual introduction of, you know, technology in a project. So I would say I don't think the percentage is as high as it should be. However, I think project impact certainly is a great start to ensuring that, you know, the most important, you know, KPIs or, you know, value milestones are hit along the way, because those would have been well defined from the beginning of a project. You know, I'll give you a statistic that might be akin to what you're asking for, Chris. And that is that only about 55% of our projects that we measure say that they've gotten the full value delivered that they had expected going in. Yeah. So, you know, and there's multiple reasons for that. And I think sometimes you have the best intentions and then things change. Pandemics happen. You lose you know, your key staff, or, you know, your executive team changes. There's many dynamics around why projects, you know, aren't as successful. With that said, if you go in having your project effectively mapped, and I think a project impact is a great way to sort of ensure that happens, that level of success, or the probability that you're going to hit 100% value is going to be a lot higher than without those sort of foundational things in place.
That's great.
If I can just add, if you don't mind, Bonnie, I think that's a really good articulation of the challenge and the aspiration that we have at ServiceNow, because this is not a ServiceNow problem. This is an industry problem, right? In buying technology. And we view that we have a mission, it's a bill level initiative to be, set the new standard for customer experience in enterprise SaaS, right? Like I feel like in technology, when you think about like great customer experience, like amazing experiences, that all of our examples, if any of us on this were to give an example of where you've had an amazing customer experience, we would give something from our consumer lives, right? Because that's where excellence has been built, right? That's where you experience this. And as we thought about this, it's like, well, why not us? Why shouldn't we be the ones that set ourselves the challenge to say, look, we should be the defining enterprise experience company for enterprise software, and so we're taking that on as a challenge and I believe that it's a really beautiful challenge because it's purpose driven, as we were talking about earlier, and it really does speak to every single function. Because as I think about it for software, it's like, what are the three things, the acid test, the simple acid test that you would want? Well, you want it to be frictionless, you want it to be delightful from an experience perspective, and you want it to be valuable. And as you think about all that, finance fits into that, and how we do our contracting. Certainly, our product fits into that. Our EBC experience fits into that. How we treat our people fit into that, because we know that customer experience and employee experience is inextricably linked. And of course, what we're talking about with ServiceNow impact. And so, I love the idea of setting the standard, really pushing this out there with our field, with our partners, into our customer base, and say, you know what, that is true of software, but that's not true of ServiceNow. ServiceNow is different. And that's my aspiration, and that's what we're kind of taking on. That's the challenge we're taking on as a company that I'm pretty inspired by.
That's really good stuff. Thanks for that, Laura. That's a nice capstone to that conversation that we just had. I want to transition to, we've got some questions, and we're getting to a point where we need to see if we can take some questions from the audience. One of the things that I hope that people take away from the conversation that we just had is back to the issue about talent. Korn Ferry, which is a global HR human capital firm, predicts that there'll be about 85 million tech workers by 2023 that the industry will be short of. 85 million. I mean, that's a gigantic freaking number. So you think about the talent that we need to attract, the talent that we need to build, and the talent that we need to retain, so that we mitigate the challenges of that $85 million person shortage, and then all the technology that we need to take away some of the more menial tasks that talent would fulfill using technology to do it, and why customer and employee experience is going to be so damn important to all of us, so that because of that people quotient. I think the pandemic has opened up people's eyes to a whole different ways of how they can exploit their personal brand in an economic model for themselves. And we as employers are going to have to be really thoughtful about that. But there's just so many interesting and powerful things going on in technology that's going to make I think the next decade certainly a lot more vibrant and a lot more significantly more interesting than the one that we just went through, which was a whirlwind and fascinating. So it's good stuff. Caitlin, are you gonna level up the Q&A for us?
Yes. Yep. We have a few questions that have come in. We may not get to everybody, so apologies for that. Really good discussion though, and if we don't get to your question, we will follow up with you after the fact. First question though, what path exists for making a transition into ServiceNow for those who are learning? Would no prior ServiceNow experience hinder the transition into a ServiceNow career? Great one for what you were just speaking to, Chris.
Yeah. Well, let me say no, it wouldn't. We see the challenge that Chris articulated in the shortage of talent, and we have an initiative that we're launching that we're super also really excited about, that we're defining as the market of talent, and we see this need to sort of massive, like we have a great sort of ecosystem training path that really has learning pathways to get you to different opportunities in a ServiceNow career. Kat Lang from my organization leads that, and I can get you in touch. Whoever's asking the question, I can get you in touch with a person that would help go a lot deeper here. But the intent is that we need to sort of make this accessible to the funnel needs to be much bigger, that we need to make this accessible to all sorts of people and create, economic opportunity, frankly, for folks who haven't had the opportunity to be part of this, this movement really that we're creating. I mean, we think that by 2025, there's going to be 250,000 new jobs around, like full-time equivalent jobs around the ServiceNow ecosystem, whether that's in ServiceNow, in partners, or in customers. So there is a massive opportunity. We need people who have nothing to do with the ServiceNow community now to be part of that, to fill that talent gap that we talked about. So there are many, many pathways, and I am happy to share more about that.
Please ask, because we share in the demand for talent, and are highly supportive of all the things that Kat and team are doing. Thanks, Laura.
Mm-hmm. All right, we'll just do one more question, and then we'll wrap up here. Without a good organizational change management strategy, linking technology and business is all for naught. What recommendations do you have for handling organizational change management throughout the digital transformation journey?
An excellent question. Barry, you want to take that one on? I know it's an area of real passion for you. It's certainly one that Crossfuze has invested significantly in trying to get to a much better place of capability.
Yeah, it's a huge challenge. Like, fundamentally, digital transformation's about technology, but it's actually all about adoption. It's all about people. So, I would be very happy to take that and spend a bit more time with that individual and go into a bit more detail or produce some content on this. We have expertise within Crossfuze to do that, but there's so many areas around communication strategies, and actually ServiceNow's customer success portal is an amazing repository for all things to do with OCM. But you need communication strategy. You need to understand the why, making sure you're communicating the why. You need to understand your support strategy, your deployment strategy, your adoption, the metrics, and so forth. But wherever that is, Caitlin, I would be very happy to put a call in with that individual if they'd like, and go to in a lot more detail. I'm just conscious of time.
I think Bonnie, you'd echo that through the projects that you look at, that change management is probably a linchpin in their success.
Without a doubt. I would say that in the lessons learned that we ask every customer as they review their project, what's something that you would wish you did more of? And the number one area is invested more in change management. It's an area that, when shortchanged, can really hinder the success of a project. So I would say build in more than you think you need for organizational change management, because you'll need it.
Yeah, super. Well, it sounds like my producer's telling me it's time to wrap up the show, and I'm not always good at following instructions, but I told Caitlin I'd behave myself for a change today. Laura, Bonnie, Barry, thank you all so much for the time that you've provided to us, the insights that you gave us, and the stories that you told. I learned a whole bunch, and really appreciated the time that we got to spend together. You were a wonderful set of panelists, and I know our audience will share my goodwill and thanks towards you. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Right. Take care.
Bye-bye.